Welcome into this week's Cavaliers weekly show on the Bleacher Report app. I am Mikey McNuggets, a.k.a. Mike Lucas from the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show. And Donovan Mitchell was on a Bleacher Report podcast over the weekend and admitted something that I've been saying now for the last couple of months, not just weeks since the Cavaliers were eliminated by the Pacers in the second round of the NBA playoffs for the second consecutive season, at least ending in the second round. But something that I've been saying since probably before the start of last season, if not for sure at the midway point of the season. And that is, in so many words, for the Cleveland Cavaliers to reach their final goal of winning an NBA championship, Evan Mobley has to be the best player on the team. It can't be Donovan Mitchell. It can't be Darius Garland. It can't be Jared Allen. It can't be DeAndre Hunter. There is one answer to who has to be the Cavaliers' best player in order to win a championship, and that is Evan Mobley. Now, Evan got hurt in Game 2 against the Pacers, had that rolled ankle, missed Game 3, came back in Game 4 and Game 5, had a very productive start to Game 5 before the Cavaliers went away from giving Evan Mobley the rock, and that was essentially what Donovan Mitchell wanted to address. So I'm going to play you a little clip here from Donovan Mitchell on the Taylor Rooks X podcast hosted by yours truly, Bleacher Report, about how Evan Mobley can progress as an NBA star and the challenge he is issuing Evan Mobley as Evan continues to ascend. This is Donovan Mitchell on the Taylor Rooks X podcast hosted by Bleacher Report.
Kenny came up to me and was like, hey, try to push Evan Mobley. And even more so next year, push Ev, push Ev, push Ev. Ev has the potential, man, and he's continuing to take that rise. And I'm glad he said it. Like, they asked who the next face of the league was in 5 years, and he said himself and Wemby. I love that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And now my push to Ev is I need 20 shots. Mm-hmm. But he has to go and say that. Give me the ball.
Yeah.
Be able to demand, you know what I mean? But I was the same way as him. I was a little more demonstrative than he was, but being comfortable in that space, that because what comes from that is fair success and praise, but also criticism. Yeah. I've had 5 of 20s, 5 of 36s, I've had those, and I've had people talk on me about that, but you keep going, and he's continuing to find that space. And I think for us to be great, and we've said it all year, he has to continue to take a step. So I tell him nah, we need more. Demand it. If I don't pass you the ball, get on my ass. Yeah. If DG don't get the ball, get on his ass. If Ty don't get it to you, get on his ass, and be okay with that. Yeah. You know what I mean? And I think that's something that he's continuing, and he's ready for it. I have no doubt. I talked to him this summer. He's ready for it. He's excited for it. But when you're quiet like the way he is, sometimes you got to get out of body a little bit more. I think that's the growth.
So that was Donovan Mitchell on the Taylor Rooks X podcast. And once again, Donovan, in so many words, is telling you that I can't be the best guy on a championship team. We have an 8-year track record of showing that me as your best player essentially equals a second round exit. So for this team to make that next step, it falls on Evan's shoulders. And yes, that's true for a million reasons. So the question today is, can Evan live up to the challenge that Donovan just issued? And if so, how? And we're going to break down a couple of the different ways. I think Evan can become more assertive, more demonstrative, more effective, and most importantly, more impactful for the Cavaliers in this upcoming season. First and foremost, in Evan's 4 seasons as a pro, these are his shots per game, just field goal attempts: 12, 12, 11.2, and 12.8. That is essentially no change over the course of 4 years. It dipped by a field goal in his 3rd year. It went up by a field goal this year. The efficiency's gone up, but the volume has not. And when Donovan says Evan has to shoot 20 plus times a game, maybe not every night. Dirk, Giannis, Tim Duncan, Kevin Garnett, some of the guys that have been associated with Evan at different stages of his development as potential ceilings, those guys are in the 18, 19 shot attempt range. And I think Evan going from 12.8 to 19 is probably unrealistic. But I do think Evan has to go from 12.8 to 16.5 to 17. I think 17 shot minimum is where Evan Mobley has to fall in 2025, 2026 for us as Cavaliers fans and analysts and NBA viewers to feel like he's taking that next step forward in terms of his aggression. We saw it in stages, in spurts this season. There were certain games where he came out firing early and would catch all his momentum. He would build his confidence up and he would let it fly at an unbelievable clip. I go back to that game earlier in the season against Charlotte where he hit a career-high 6 threes and he had 4 of them in the first quarter. And there were other games where he was an afterthought. And I'll go back to these two examples, but Game 5 against Indiana, where he had a monster first quarter and then didn't touch the ball for quite a while. Finally got back to him in the fourth quarter and it was too little too late. And their first loss of the season when they were 15-0 playing the Boston Celtics. And Boston had no answer for Mobley in the first quarter on that hideous green court that was part of the NBA Cup atmosphere and presentation. Court was hideous, but Evan Mobley was perfect early on. He was unstoppable. Boston had no answer for what he was doing down low. And then the Cavs stopped going to him for inexcusable reasons. And afterwards, Kenny Atkinson said, that's my bad. I got to do a better job of continuing our guards or forcing our guards to continue feeding Evan, reminding Evan to call for the ball and be more assertive when you get these mismatches. And if those two things aren't happening, I got to call a timeout. I got to organize a play and make sure that Evan is getting a touch when we need it. If you go back to that OKC Indiana finals, Mark Daigneault, I thought, got outcoached early, and by the end of the series, had found some really nice adjustments. But in some of the games where OKC struggled offensively, it's because Indiana was essentially saying, SGA, you're not going to beat us one-on-one. We're going to force you to kick the ball out, to make other people beat us. And then the offense got stagnant. And there were situations where SGA would kick it and would never get the ball back. And he'd be kind of just floating on the perimeter, not necessarily as involved in the game plan as you would need. And Daigneault would call a timeout. And I can think of 3 separate occasions, and I'm sure there was more. I could just think of 3 off the top of my head, where coming out of a timeout, Daigneault created some play, drew up some offensive concept that had SGA as the primary screener coming off an action to get open and generate a good look. On one, it was a little flex screen that he set the back screen for Jalen Williams, who sprinted out to the corner. SGA got a wide open backdoor layup. Another one, he came out on a pin down on the left side, turned the corner, missed the mid-range jump shot, but that's a high-quality look for SGA. And the third was basically the same play on the opposite side where he was able to turn the corner, get to a floater, and he got fouled and made both free throws. Kenny can do that with Evan. You can do that's even easier with your bigs. So first and foremost, it has to be the shot volume from Evan. That has to go up. How does shot volume go up? Well, as I mentioned, it starts with the coaching and the play call and making sure that Evan is getting the necessary touches in and out of timeouts, in and out of quarters, in and out of the start of the game, out of halftime. When you can design a play to get Evan a look, draw it up. See what he likes, see what he doesn't like, see what he can, see what he can't do, and then play to his strengths and find mismatches and find switches you think you can take advantage of. So it comes partly on coaching. Then it comes partly on the guards. Donovan, Darius, Lonzo, Craig Porter Jr., Sam Merrill, Tyrese Proctor, Max Strus, DeAndre Hunter. Anybody who has the ball in their hands for the Cleveland Cavaliers this season has to make a concerted effort to get Evan the rock, to feed him the ball. If other teams are going to switch on the perimeter in some of their pick and roll actions, well, sure, Donovan can take a big off the dribble and generate a good look. Darius can take a big off the dribble and generate a good look. They're all capable of doing that. But is that a higher quality option for the Cleveland offense than trying to dump it down low for the big little mismatch when Evan has a smaller defender on him, 8 feet from the basket? It may be on times, depending on who the defender switching is and who the defender now guarding Donovan or Darius or Lonzo or whoever is. But last season, that was not their first thought as an offensive player when other teams switched on the perimeter. Their first thought was, we're going to attack the mismatch. Our offensive philosophy at its core principle is get 2 feet in the paint, make the defense rotate, kick and attack rotations. So that's what Donovan and Darius did. And I don't think they should deviate away from that offensive philosophy as a whole. I mean, they did finish with the second best offensive rating in the history of the NBA last year in the regular season. But I do think knowing the steps that Evan has to take for this team to reach its ultimate goal, it makes perfect sense for Cleveland to, when they get those switches, say, Evan, go, attack, do what you do best, develop a little more of a mid-range game, become a little more physical, and punish other teams for conceding those switches. And if they don't want to concede those switches, because Evan has become so efficient at those down low, big little mismatches, then other teams won't switch as frequently, and that puts the offensive ball handler in an advantageous position heading downhill, giving Donovan and Darius more opportunities to score at the rim. It works both ways, and it helps both players. If the guards feed the big early and the big takes advantage, then they won't get as many switches later. If the other guard is trying to now fight over the screen, then he's playing off Donovan's hip. If they go under the screen, Darius can stop on a dime and fire a three. It goes both ways, but you have to make that conscious, concerted effort to feed the ball down low to Evan Mobley. And then the last part of this comes on Evan Mobley himself. And he's the main culprit in not being aggressive, assertive, and demonstrative enough to demand the basketball. Keyword there, demand the basketball. Donovan used it. I've been using it. Kenny Atkinson has used it. Kobe Altman has used it. If Donovan Mitchell is speaking to Taylor Rooks on a Bleacher Report podcast, this is not Donovan just freewheeling and freestyling on his own. This is an initiative coming from the top levels of the organization, because they're not stupid. They understand that a undersized guard in Donovan Mitchell, the history of the league says those aren't the guys that win championships. It's the semi-unicorn caliber players like a 7-footer in Evan Mobley with the ability to take guys off the dribble, shoot threes, and finish in the post, who are also, by the way, defensive player of the years, who win championships. So Evan has to become more demonstrative and demand the basketball. And when he gets the basketball, make strong decisions, make quick reads, make defenses pay. They're never going to respect you if you don't make them pay, and you can't make them pay until you punish them. So when you get those opportunities, Evan, attack. Go into attack mode. Evan Mobley will never be in a basketball situation that is more predicated on him being more aggressive next season for the rest of his career. It is all on the line for the Cavs and Evan Mobley next season. He has to. It's not an optional thing for Cleveland. He has to take that next step if they're going to reach the pinnacle of the league. They won 64 games in the regular season and fizzled out in the playoffs, partly because they caught a red-hot Indiana team at the worst time, and B, because their guys haven't played up to their playoff potential. They've been abysmal in the playoffs in basically 3 straight seasons. And how do you change that? Well, you change your offensive philosophy. You don't necessarily play through such a guard-oriented three-point shooting offense. You can go to a guy in Evan Mobley who's a bit more efficient, who gets the ball in a bit more efficient scoring areas. And he can become more assertive. And I think the swap of Lonzo for Ty Jerome was a decision by the Cavs front office. Whether we agree with it or not, that's a different stream. We talked about that last week. But a decision by the front office to find a point guard in the traditional manner who will go above and beyond to find Evan Mobley when he's on the court with Ev. Ty Jerome was a great player last year. Finished 3rd and 6th man of the year. I thought he was underpaid in free agency. I'm surprised he said Cleveland never contacted him about a contract. I would have, but they didn't. And Ty's a score-first guard. He's looking for his shot. If it's not there, then he's looking for others. And when he was on the second unit last year playing alongside Evan, Evan stayed as the third option offensively instead of becoming second behind Donovan Mitchell. But with Lonzo Ball in that spot, if Lonzo can stay healthy, which granted is an absolutely gigantic, massive, colossal, you name the big adjective, it fits that category, big if, it's going to feed Evan every time. And where do you find some of that creation if it's not coming from Ty Jerome and Lonzo's not the same caliber of offensive creator? You find it by unlocking a new level to Evan Mobley. Here's what Evan has to do to be better offensively. He's got to tighten up the handle. He got better last year, still room to improve. The better his handle, the more he'll be willing to attack from beyond the perimeter, the harder it is for guys to stay in front of him, the more fouls he'll draw, the more free throws he shoots, the better it is for the Cavs. He has to learn how to punish smaller defenders in the post. If they switch, punish them. And most importantly, develop some sort of mid-range game. Evan played in like 74 games last year and took 34 mid-range jumpers. Now, the Cavs offense was predicated on threes and layups. I get it. But Evan Mobley at 6'11", 7 foot has plenty of touch that I think that's a good look for him. I don't want a ton of Cavs shooting mid-range jump shots, but I think late in shot clocks, feeding it to Evan at the high post around the elbow and letting him go one-on-one, and if he has to settle for a 15, 16-foot jumper, I'll live with that. But he has to be more efficient at it. He wasn't particularly efficient on those 34 attempts. If he becomes more efficient in that area, if he can tighten his handle up a tiny bit, continue to develop as a three-point shooter, and punish defenders down low, there's no reason that on 17, 18 shots per game with an increased free throw rate, Evan Mobley can't average 24, 25 points a game next season. I'm telling you guys, if it's ever going to happen, it's going to happen this year. I believe in Evan. The Cavs believe in Evan. And if the Cavs want to reach a championship, like this is the 5th time I've said it in 16 minutes now, it is imperative that Evan Mobley surpasses Donovan Mitchell as the Cavaliers' #1 player. What's up with those LeBron rumors floating around, by the way? Let's address that real quick before we wrap up today. LeBron James was spotted in Cleveland, at least the greater Cleveland area last week. He was golfing in Akron with some of his former St. Vincent, St. Mary's teammates. He was wearing a welcome home hat. He got in a workout at the Cavaliers practice facility. I did a little digging and found out that any NBA player, any active NBA player, does have access to opposing teams' practice facilities throughout the offseason. How often do they utilize that privilege and that right? It doesn't sound like it's very often, but it is legal, and it's not unheard of. But does that mean he's coming back to join the Cleveland Cavaliers? We talked a little bit about this last week. I have heard from people I trust that the Cavs are unwilling to break up their core and trade significant pieces of their future for a 1-year rental or a 1 to 2 year runway of LeBron James. Once again, I'm not saying I agree with that. I just think, and I trust the people who have told me that that is how the Cavaliers view this situation. But on a buyout, if LA were to buy out LeBron, would he come to Cleveland? I think LeBron loves the attention. At the end of the day, I think this is all a giant leverage play for LeBron James. The NBA wasn't talking about LeBron. They were talking about the Thunder, the up-and-comers, Kevin Durant. Are the Rockets now the favorites to dethrone, OKC in the West? The Pacers, the Celtics. What do you do with these teams who just had their stars suffer Achilles injuries entering next year? What's Giannis going to do? Will Luka re-sign the Supermax this year or wait one more year and try and add even more money to the bottom line of his future contract? The NBA world was talking about a million things, and none of them involved LeBron James. And LeBron James, for as good of a player as he is, and I think he's the second best player in the history of the world, second best player ever. He's the greatest player I've ever saw and I've ever watched with my own two eyes. He's done things that no one else simply can, and his durability and his sustained greatness is unmatched by almost any athlete in any sport ever. And he's earned the right to want to be the talk of the town and the center of attention and the guy that everyone is waiting on his every move. But because of the Luka Doncic trade, LeBron's age, the future contract situations, he was never going to be that. So how does LeBron reinsert himself as the focal point of the NBA offseason conversation? He flirts with his old team. He says, maybe I will resign, maybe I won't. Rich Paul throws out some cryptic quotes about what he may or may not do moving forward. And it leads to all of us talking about one LeBron James. Will it amount to anything? Will he actually leave LA? I don't know if there's a trade market for him. It's a lot of assets you have to give up to match that salary or get in the ballpark to make a viable deal work. Would the Lakers want to trade a top 15, top 10 guy in the league right now when they are in a position to potentially be a contender in the West? Will they buy him out? And what benefit does that have? At the end of the day, this feels like a leverage play from LeBron to try and get his name and get his face back in front of the national media to get people talking about LeBron, because I do believe, and there's nothing wrong with this, that LeBron loves being the center of attention. And this is a fun conversation. These are fun hypotheticals, and I would welcome LeBron back to Cleveland with open arms if he wanted to rejoin the Cavaliers for one last title push. I just don't think it's going to happen. That's going to wrap it up for this week's Cavs Weekly on the Bleacher Report app. We're taking a little hiatus here for the next couple of weeks as Bleacher Report redoes some of the inner workings of its streaming app, and the Cavs are a bit of a hiatus here until we get closer to training camp. So if you like what you heard, you can follow me on Twitter. My handle is @MikeLucasTV. You can see it on the screen. And we will see you guys in a couple of weeks in August for the next edition of Cavaliers Weekly. For now, though, I'm Mikey McNuggets, and I'll see you soon. Go Cavs. Peace.